ॐ शन्नो मित्रः शं वरुणः शन्नो भवत्वर्यमा शन्न इन्द्रो बृहस्पतिः शन्नो विष्णुरुक्रमः नमो ब्रह्मणे नमस्ते वायो त्वमेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्मासि त्वमेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्म वदिष्यामि ऋतं वदिष्यामि सत्यं वदिष्यामि तन्मामवतु तद्वक्तारमवतु अवतु माम् अवतु वक्तारम् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। सहनौ भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। यश्छन्दसा वृषभो विश्वरूपः छन्दोभ्योऽध्यमृतात् सम्बभूव समेन्द्रो मेधया आस्पृणोतु अमृतस्य देवधारणो भूयासं शरीरं मे विचर्षणं जिह्वा मे मधुमत्तमा कर्णाभ्यां भूरिविश्रुवं ब्रह्मणः कोशोऽसि मेधया पिहितः श्रुतं मे गोपाय। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। अहं वृक्षस्य रेरिवा कीर्तिः पृष्ठं गिरेरिव ऊर्ध्वपवित्रो वाजिनीव स्वमितमस्मि द्रविणगुं सवर्चसं सुमेधा अमृतोक्षितः इति त्रिशङ्कोर्वेदानुवचनम्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। आप्यायन्तु मम अङ्गानि वाक्प्राणश्चक्षुः श्रोत्रमथो बलमिन्द्रियाणि च सर्वाणि सर्वं ब्रह्मोपनिषदं माहं ब्रह्म निराकुर्यां मा ब्रह्म निराकरोत् अनिराकरणमस्त्वनिराकरणं मे अस्तु। तदात्मनि निरतेय उपनिषत्सु धर्माः ते मयि सन्तु। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। वाङ् मे मनसि प्रतिष्ठिता मनो मे वाचि प्रतिष्ठितम् आविराविर्म एधि वेदस्य मानि ईस्थः श्रुतं मे मा प्रहासीः अनेनादितेन अहोरात्रान् सन्दधामि ऋतं वदिष्यामि सत्यं वदिष्यामि तन्मामवतु तद्वक्तारमवतु अवतु माम् अवतु वक्तारमवतु वक्तारम्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। भद्रं नोऽपि वातयमनः। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। भद्रं कर्णेभिः शृणुयाम देवाः भद्रं पश्येम अक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैस्तुष्टुवागुंसस्तनूभिः व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः। स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृद्धश्रवाः स्वस्ति नः पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करं शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः नारायणं पद्मभुवं वसिष्ठं शक्तिं च तत्पुत्रपराशरं च व्यासं शुकं गौडपदं महान्तं गोविन्दयोगीन्द्रमथास्य शिष्यं श्रीशङ्कराचार्यमथास्य पद्मपादं च हस्तामलकं च शिष्यं तं तोटकं वार्तिककारमन्यान् अस्मद्गुरून् सन्ततो मानतोऽस्मि। ॐ विश्वं दर्पणदृश्यमाननगरी तुल्यं निजान्तर्गतं पश्यन्नात्मनि मायया बहिर्भूतं यथा निद्रया यत्साक्षात् कुरुते प्रबोधसमये स्वात्मानमेवाद्वयं तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः। इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये बीजस्यान्तरिवाङ्कुरो जगदिदं प्राङ्निर्विकल्पं पुनः मायाकल्पितदेशकालकलना वैचित्र्यचित्रीकृतं मायावीव विजृम्भयत्यपि महायोगी वयस्वेच्छया तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः। इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये यस्यैव स्फुरणं सदात्मकम् असत्कल्पार्थकं भासते साक्षात् तत्त्वमसीति वेदवचसा यो बोधयत्याश्रितान् यत्साक्षात्करणात् भवेन्न पुनरावृत्तिर्भवाम्भोनिधौ तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः। इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये नानाच्छिद्रघटोदरस्थितमहादीपप्रभाभास्वरं ज्ञानं यस्य तु चक्षुरादिकरणद्वारा बहिस्पन्दते जानामीति तमेव भान्तमनुभात्येतत्समस्तं जगत् तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः। इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये देहं प्राणमपीन्द्रियानपि चलां बुद्धिं च शून्यं विदुः स्त्रीबालान्तजडोपमास्त्वमिति भ्रान्ताभृशं वादिनः मायाशक्तिविलासकल्पितमहा व्यामोहसंहारिणे तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः। इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये। So it's been 2 weeks since we went through the Brahma Sutra, and so today we will hopefully conclude the second sutra. So let's chant both of the sutras that we are now familiar with. Athato Brahma Jigyasa. So once again, Athato Brahma Jigyasa Janmadyasya Yataha Janmadyasya Yataha. So we're doing the second sutra, Janmadyasya Yataha. So before I start the conclusion of the second verse, second sutra that we're going to do today, I thought we'll spend a couple of minutes just discussing some of the important words used in Vedanta, which is directly relevant to what we are going to do today. So there are, you're familiar with words like Viveka, Vairagya, Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasanam, etc. So in those words, something to really think about as it applies to our lives is, so the word jnani is used. Jnaninaha. Jnani means the one that knows. And this is also very close to the word Shrotriya. So Shrotriya means the one who is familiar with Shruti, one which is familiar with what the Vedantic teaching is, how it is taught, what are the concepts about it. One who is familiar, one who has been taught. We call Shrotriya. And the same word in mostly the same meaning is called Jnani. Then and so Shrotriya. Then another word is used, Brahmanishta. Shrotriyam Brahmanishtam Gaccha. May you go to someone who is both a Shrotriya as well as a Brahmanishta. This is given as instructions in various places in Mundaka Upanishad. Pariksha lokan karmachitan ayat brahmanaha nasti akritaha kritena tad vijnana artham brahma gurumeva vigachet shotriyam brahmanishtam. This is how it is used. So the word is used as brahmanishtam as different from jnanina, from jnani or shotriya. So what is the difference? So this is an important thing to see. A jnani or a shotriya, I'm using them in synonyms, is one who understands how the Shastra explains the concepts of life. Because it is very possible that you may have never seen how the Shastra explains. But if you are familiar with it, then it is said that you are a jnani. And I would say this, that for those of you that have been listening to Vedanta for a long time with me, or with anybody else, I would call you a jnani. We all are not yet Brahmanishta. So Brahmanishta means that you are able to see the vision of the jnanam continuously without any interruption. That is the waking up, which comes from mananam and nididhyasanam and so on. That takes a while. But the jnani is really based on shravanam, that you are already familiar with the concepts of what the Shastra is saying. Okay, so we have used the word jnani, shrotriya and brahmanishta. There is another word called viveki. Also an important word to understand how that is used. I'm telling you, because when I read the literature, these words are very precisely used to convey very definite ideas. So let's look at the word viveki. What viveki means is one who is able to see what the Shastra is saying, who is able to do he or she is able to distinguish some things based on what the Shastra is saying. He's got a viveki. So in summary, I would say a viveki is a jnani in making. It is on the way to become a jnani. Once you have employed viveka in various places, then you become a jnani. Then you can say your shravanam you are right in the middle of shravanam and you are doing well. So the viveki is the initial concepts to become a jnani. Okay? The reason I'm doing all this is because this is going to be talked about as a conclusion of the second sutra. So here's what I want to get at. Take the two words which is called inert and alive. For now, the word alive is not quite what we want to get, but it is close enough. So one is inert, so a table is inert, whereas an ant crawling on the table is alive. So one is jada. The word jada is used for inert, and the word Chaitanya is used for alive. Actually, Chaitanya is more than alive, but for now, let's just say Chaitanya is alive. Okay? So an ant crawling is alive, whereas a table is inert. Okay? This is the view of one who has not studied the Shastra. And that means you are not one who is not a Viveki. This is normal. You ask anybody, can you distinguish between inert and alive? And say yes. If it moves, then it's alive. If it just stays there, then it is inert. Very simple. In Shastra, there is a different definition of the distinction between Jada and Chaitanya. This one has to learn as a Viveki. And like that, if you apply all this Viveka, which I'm going to explain in a minute, to all the concepts of Vedanta, then you become a Jnani. So this is how I connect all the words. Okay? How does the Shastra make a distinction between Jada and Chaitanya? It makes it as the following way. If a thing is moving, but it is moving dependent on something else, not by itself, then it is called Jada. So the real distinction is not whether it is non-moving or moving, but whether it is moving, self-moving, or is it dependent moving. A simple example of that is the heat of the fire and all the other things other than fire. This is the Viveka. So when you say that the water is boiling hot, the Viveka means it is really the fire in the water which is making it hot. Because the water is not hot by itself. It is propelled by something. And when you remove that, as soon as you switch off the stove, the water cools down. So, in the view of the Shastra, it is not whether it is non-moving or moving, but whether the movement is propelled by something else. Okay? So this is the example to remember. Let's extend the example to what we say is the electricity and the appliances. There we say that the appliance, there is a light shining. And does the light belong to the bulb or to the electricity? The bulb is capable of reflecting the electricity. So in a non-viveki, it would be called Chaitanya, because it is lighting up. Whereas in the eyes of the Shastra, it is a Jada. You see, the line between Jada and Chaitanya is different from the eyes of the Shastra. Because the Shastra says, really speaking, as we are studying in the Kena Upanishad on the Tuesday night, Shotrasya Shotram, Chakshushascha Chakshu, the real power to see comes from the Atma, not from the appliance, from the electricity, not from the appliance. So this is the view of the Viveki. And for those of you that have been studying this, it is very clear. And if you are now consistently applying this distinction between Jada and Chaitanya, you are a Jnani. So you can you can congratulate yourself and say, I'm a Jnani. I'm not a Brahmanishta yet. You may be a Brahmanishta already. What am I supposed to? I don't judge you. But you just decide on your own. And if you are still studying, coming to classes, still having doubts and so on, then we know we are still on the way to become Brahmanishta. But you are a Jnani. The only final word before we go into the second sutra is that is a little bit like in the case of an appliance and the electricity, it looks like two separate things altogether. But in the eyes of quantum mechanics, that is not the case. Because in quantum mechanics, and the E is equal to mc squared, the energy and mass are really one and the same, interchangeable, different forms. And so even appliance is simply a massed electricity, a massed energy. It's an energy which has been converted into a mass, but it is energy. And electricity is a subtle energy, and the appliance is a gross energy. That's all. This distinction is even clearer in Shastra, where Shastra says that suppose you are in the ocean and you see small pieces of ice. Normally you don't see small pieces of ice. I remember this, we went to Alaska on a cruise one time. We were passing by some kind of a famous bay. I don't remember the name of it. And from there, what we saw, it was an enclosed bay. It is not like San Francisco Bay. It is not open to but of course much colder than this area. So it was enclosed with snow-capped mountains. And in the summertime, the mountain snow would break off and become into small pieces and be on the water all over. And we saw that. I remember that our ship was moving quite rapidly, and we could see small portions of ice in the water floating by. They were not dangerous because they were much smaller. The ship was much bigger than that. If there was an iceberg, then the ship would be very careful. But here's the point. There, these solidified ice pieces and the liquefied water of the ocean is one and the same. One and the same. There's no difference. It is one has not yet melted, the other one has melted. That's all. Swami Maheshananji had given a very beautiful example. He says, you can actually make a salt doll from the salt in the ocean water. It's possible. It's possible. This is how the salt is made even in the San Francisco Bay. There are factories that are making salt from the water. And so supposing you make a salt, it doesn't be a doll, but just a solid piece of the salt. That is nothing but a solidified water, ocean water. And it can be if you put this back in the water, it will become water. So in that case, the reason I'm saying is that the distinction between Jada and Chaitanya is not based on whether it is moving or not, but whether it is moving not because of itself. Like, another example you can give is even in the old days, before we had all these electrified toys and so on and so forth, you can actually wind up, a spring. I remember that when we were growing up, you would find these little toys that they have a key, and you wind up the key, and then you set the toy moving, and the toy moves. If the toy moves, doesn't mean it is Chaitanya. It is still Jada, but there is a power of the spring that is making it move. Okay? Now I've spent 15 minutes on this concept. So there's a reason I'm doing it, and that is relevant in the discussion of the second sutra which is going to come up. So please remember that. This is the distinction between Jada and Chaitanya, which a Viveki knows, because the Viveki is now schooled in the Shastric teaching. Okay, all right. So now let us start our analysis of the second sutra. So the second sutra, which is also the second adhikarana. If you remember what the definition of an adhikarana is, that means a separate topic, a separate conceptual thought is called adhikarana. And there may be a bunch of things, sutras, that are all bunched up together to unfold a particular concept. They're all called part of the same adhikarana. The first four sutras, just to remind you, are unique because each sutra is an adhikaranam. Later on, you will have multiple sutras within an adhikaranam, but the first four sutras, are one adhikaranam, one sutra. So the second adhikaranam is the lakshana of Brahman. We know this already, I'm revising it. So Brahma Lakshanam is the adhikarana, that is the topic, that is the subject matter of the second sutra. And here Swami Paramarthananda points out very nicely is that this is one of the most significant sutras in all of the Brahma Sutra, all 555 sutras. Most significant. Why is it the most significant? Because it is a foundation sutra. And it's a Viveki sutra. Here Viveka is very important. Okay, so please keep and I'll come back to it as to why. We have to explain anything that we say. You cannot just say something and move on. That's the very important sutra. And people will say, why are you saying it's an important sutra? I said, well, I don't know why but this is supposed to be. No. If I say it's an important sutra, I have to justify it. Anyway, so we'll come to that later on. So now, we saw, and now to continue with this, that the second sutra is Lakshana Paravakya. This gives the identification of Brahman, the definition of Brahman. And there we saw that there are two types of Lakshana. One is Tatastha Lakshana and one is Swarupa Lakshana. So the Swarupa Lakshana, what is the definition of a Swarupa Lakshana? When you define something in terms of its own innate features, it is Swarupa Lakshana. Example is that supposing you describe a home and then you say this home is 3 bedrooms, 2 stories, 2,500 square feet, and it has a style of, contemporary style house. Then it is a Swarupa Lakshana. But suppose you have lots of homes that look alike. All of them have the same Swarupa. It doesn't happen in Vedanta because there's only one Vastu. But in Laukika use, you can have multiple. Like for example, Swami Dayananji, I remember, was saying, he says, when I got down from the airport in San Francisco for the first time, even in those days in 1960s, 70s rather, He could see that on the South San Francisco, on the top of the hill, there were multiple homes that looked alike. So if that's the situation, then how to do, you cannot do Swarupa Lakshana. You cannot say that one which is 3 bedrooms, 2 stories, because they're all 3 bedrooms, all 2 stories. Then you may have to go through a Tatastha Lakshana. And it just so happens that there might be a crow sitting on one of them. And then you say, you remember, see that house which has a crow sitting on it? You say, yeah, that's my home, we are going there. It's called Tatastha Lakshana. And so the Tatastha means one which is not always there, but it happens to be associated with it. Similarly, the Lakshana for Brahman is Jagat Karanam Brahman. Jagat Karanam Brahman. It is the cause of the whole manifestation of the world, the cosmos as we see it. Everything. It is the Jagat Karanam. This is the Tatastha Lakshana. Swarupa Lakshana, as you know, is given in various places. Satchidanandaha, Swarupam, Satyam Jnanam Anantam. All of those are called Swarupa Lakshana. But the Tatastha Lakshana is Janma Adi Yasya. Janma Adi Yasya. This is the second sutra. So now we can say, if that is the case, then is it true that it is the Tatastha Lakshana? Yes. Another part of the Viveka. So this means that all that you see with respect to yourself, how do we see with respect to ourselves? I'm seeing, I have eyes, and I can hear, and I'm seeing things, I can hearing sounds, and I have a mind, and I can think, and I have some ideas about thoughts, and it also gives me sukha dukkha. I have some pleasant thoughts, and all those kinds of experiences and so on are a part of the Jagat. It is part of the cosmos. That does not define Brahman. What that means is, because in the case of the house, it just so happens that the crow happened to be sitting there for a short time. While this person was showing the home to his friend, he just happened to be there. Otherwise, he would have used some other ways. But it was convenient because the crow was sitting there on top of the home. And now the next time you come in, the crow is gone. But the vastu is still there. The house is still there. But it is no longer associated with a sitting crow. The same thing is true for us. I am still there when the Jagat will go. And not only will it go, it goes and I'm not aware of it. When you switch from a Jagrat Avastha to a Swapna Avastha, from a waking state to a dream state, it goes. It's like, instead of having a crow, you have another bird sitting there. You have an owl sitting there. It is exactly like that. So when the Jagrat Avastha goes, I'm still there, but when the Swapna Avastha comes, then I am the cause of the Swapna Avastha. That is the Tatastha Lakshana. And in deep sleep, both the crow and the owl go, and I'm sitting there all by myself. This is the truth. So this is the Tatastha Lakshana. So in order for you to get rid of the Jagat, you don't have to wait for Pralaya. You don't even have to wait for death. Just the night is enough. It's a very clear example. We should see that very clearly. No matter what the problem is, whatever it is happening, you've got things to do and you are disappointed or you're happy or something, gone. Then it just comes back as the Tatastha Lakshana, not as Swarupa Lakshana. Swarupa Lakshana says the same. Alright, so now this begs a question. Okay, if Brahman has both his Swarupa Lakshana, which is Satyam Jnanam Anantam, and a Tatastha Lakshana, which is Janmadi Asya Yataha, why is Vyasacharya using Tatastha Lakshana? Because Tatastha Lakshana is only an intermediate stage. You have to go to the Swarupa Lakshana to really see what the Vastu is, what is Brahman, what is Atma, what does it consist of. Why doesn't he go straight away into Swarupa Lakshana? And that would be Adhato Brahma Jigyasa. Then the second one is Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. Then the third one would be whatever, then you continue on. Why doesn't he do that? Why is he going Janmadi Asya Yata? There is a reason for it. If there is something put together, this is not like, oops, yeah, you're right, I should have done that. I wasn't thinking, I guess I was tired or something. No. If there is a reason for it, it is there. The reason is that it is not easy to see Swarupa Lakshana. So an intermediate step is necessary. It is like, if you are you are sitting down and on the stage there is somebody who's on the stage I remember when we were at the there's the big hall at Jain temple, and so the stage is about, I don't know, about 2.5 feet maybe tall, maybe 3 feet even, about 3 feet. So supposing somebody is saying, supposing there is a teacher sitting on the stage talking and they're having some problems with their mic and they say, can you help me please? Now, if you are a youngster, you may be able to immediately go onto the stage without a step. But if you are a normal person, especially an older person like me, you can't do that. So you need to find some steps on the side way and go there. It's too difficult. Similarly here, Swarupa Lakshanam is too difficult in the beginning. In the beginning, once you know it, then you can do it. But in the beginning, it is difficult. You need a step. Why is it difficult? One can ask. The reason is, unlike a home, which is visible to you, clearly visible to you, Brahman is not that way. You cannot see it the same way that you see other things. This is what we are studying in the Kena Upanishad. That is the real topic of the Kena Upanishad and all the Upanishads, not just Kena Upanishad. Because it requires, it is kind of like, Swami Maheshananji had said, that if you want to see pieces of dirt, then your eye is simple enough. But supposing you want to see some bugs, like bacteria, you cannot see it with your eyes. You have to fine-tune with some instruments to see it. And if you have a virus, like the coronavirus, it is even more difficult to see. Another step you have to take. Even the bacteria is easy to see. Similarly, it's not as though the Brahman is a virus, but it is very subtle. This is why most people make a mistake about it. We are Brahman, but we don't know it. Why? Because it is not easy to see. Because I don't get something, I don't understand something which does not have a form. This is the issue. I'm used to saying, I know I'm Brahman, but I don't know. Why? Because I'm looking for some specific vastu that I can say, oh, that's me. It's not like that. So therefore, we can say that it is not Swarupa Lakshanam that is taken up. That's why the second sutra is Tatastha Lakshanam first. Okay. Now, we come to the topic at hand, which I started with, which is Jada versus Chaitanya. Jada versus Chaitanya. Okay. So here, please note the uniqueness of Vedanta. The uniqueness of Vedas, the Vaidika Jnanam, is something absolutely unique. How is it unique? It is unique because if you make a distinction between the two aspects of this creation, which is Prakriti and Purusha, or Maya and Brahman, same thing. Brahman is Purusha and Prakriti is Maya. So here the distinction is that of the very Adhisthana of Maya, unformless, and the form of Maya. Very much like in an ocean, the water is formless, but the waves are formful. So there is a Prakriti and a Purusha. Prakriti and a Purusha. So the uniqueness of Vedantic teaching, this is what we have to really grasp very clearly, is everyone else believes and thinks that Prakriti is the Karanam of Jagat. Everyone. Right up to the current so-called science. The scientific mind and the thinking. They all feel that the material is the cause of evolution of material. And Vedanta says no. Material may reflect the spirit, if you want to call it spirit, which is Purusha and Brahman, Atma, Paramatma, Swarupa Lakshanam. It may reflect it, but it is not the basic cause. This is the uniqueness of Vedanta. So this is brought out in the second verse, and this is why the second verse, as a foundation verse, is considered to be the most important one in the entire Brahma Sutra. So let's understand that very well. So Vyasacharya has chosen the Chetana Vastu as the Karanam, Natu Achetanam Prakriti. This is what is being emphasized in this sutra. Okay? So, this choice of this teaching by Vyasacharya is the very avatara of Vishnu, Ishvara's avatara. Is really Ishvara talking, not some person talking, because we've already seen it. What is unique, another thing about is unique is that we don't invent knowledge, we simply reflect the knowledge which has been given by Ishvara. And Ishvara says, listen, I am the Jagat Karana, not some individual material things, that not Prakriti. This is being emphasized in the second one. Okay, now this has various aspects to it. So there are actually, Swami Paramathananda has done a very good job of saying there are 5 reasons why this sutra is explained the way it is, to distinguish it from everybody else. First one, to clearly distinguish Vedanta teaching from what is called the Sankhya philosophy. So the Sankhya is a philosophy which is still prevalent very much in India, always has been and will be. And it confuses between Sankhya and Vedanta. Excuse me. It's especially confusing between Vedanta and Sankhya because it sometimes uses the same words. They also talk about Purusha, which is Asangaha, Asanga Chaitanya Atma. In both, Savikara is used and Nirvikara is used. And so, all that is common between them, and therefore it is easy to get confused between the Sankhya philosophy and the Vedanta Jnanam, knowledge. There's a difference between knowledge and philosophy. Philosophy is speculation. Now, why? One of the reasons he is, and in this is brought out in the commentary on the second verse. Adi Shankara may not really explain this in the same detail, but his Shishyas and so on, they can expand it to understand all this. So the first reason that Adi Shankara uses is to clearly distinguish between Vedanta and Sankhya. Why? Because Sankhyas believe that Prakriti is the Jagat Karana. Material is the Jagat Karana. And they give it a very fancy name which is called Prakriti. Prakriti is a very interesting name. Prakriti means Prakarshena Kriti. For those of you who are music fans, you will see there is a word called kriti. Kriti means a composition. In Hindi they will say, मैं आपको एक कृति सुनाता हूँ. I'm going to now sing a composition. And the composition may be like based on current yaga and so on, raga, but it has some form which is personalized. So it's called kriti. Prakriti means prakarshena kriti. Means it's a composition, but an amazing composition. My goodness, if you just look at the composition of the whole world, how it is balanced, the days and nights and all those kinds of things, is called Prakriti. So, Sankhya say Prakriti is the cause of the creation. And Purusha is Asangaha. So they also use some of the same concept as we do. But they feel that the Purusha and Prakriti are two parallel realities. We say no. Anyway, to summarize, the first reason is that Vyasacharya wants to distinguish the Vedanta from Sankhya. Why? Because Sankhya believe that Prakriti is the Jagat Karanam. Vedanta says no. Purusha is the Jagat Karanam. This is number one. In number two, not only in the Sankhya, but in all systems of philosophy, there is the same thinking, including what is called the modern science. In the modern science also, they are interested. In fact, when Einstein died, he was trying to pursue the ultimate equation which will say the theory of everything, TOE. Even now, the science is saying we're going to come up with the ultimate explanation, how it is done. And it all comes down to particles, material. The particles combine together, doing this, that, or the other, and they create this whole thing. This is called cause hunting. So in all philosophies, whether it is modern science, or it is Sankhya, or yoga, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, because in Nyaya and Vaisheshika it is atomic, Paramanu, it is all atoms. The modern science has even split up into fundamental particles, strings, and those are the cause of the creation. If you combine them in certain ways, then oxygen and hydrogen, they combine into H2O, becomes water. And so really, Paramanu is responsible. We say no. Achetana. This is all jada. It looks like it's doing it, just like it looks like the bulb is responsible for the light. It is not. So this is what would be called Achetana Karanavada. So whether you are an Astika or a Nastika, whether you believe in the Vedas or not based on the Vedas, it just means matter alone is the fundamental cause, like Big Bang and unicellular arguments making into multicellular arguments. And in fact, science believes that life is only very recent. It originates out of matter. That life is born out of the brain. This is all Aviveki talk. Viveki talk is no. There is only one Vastu, which is the cause, which is Brahman. Consciousness. Yeah, here Swami Paramarthananda says that in the either in Nyaya or Vaisheshika, there are 9 types of matter, and one of them is the Atma. So the Atma is also Achetanam. So this is the second reason for how Vyasacharya explains this. Third one. Now let's go to the third one. The third one is that the Brahma Sutra, which is a reflection of Upanishads, which is a restatement of the Upanishad. It is not the Upanishads are the fundamental statements, and the Brahma Sutra as well as the Bhagavad Gita, Smriti and so on is really a compilation of the various concepts given in the Upanishad. It is not the original one. So that's why it is called Vedanta Sutra. It is not called Vyasa Sutra. It's Vedanta Sutra, Brahma Sutra. And so the third point is that all Upanishads predominantly say that Brahman is the material cause of the creation. So note the word predominantly. Every now and then it says Prakriti is the material cause. Predominantly it says Purusha is the material cause, Brahma is the Prakriti, is the material cause, is the Jagat Karanam. Occasionally it says Prakriti and the Maya is the material cause. And a lot of the other people pull out the occasional use of they and say, see, Vedanta is also saying it. And we will come to that point later. So, in the fourth sutra that we will study later, it is called Samanvaya Adhyaya. Fourth chapter, fourth Adhikarana. In that one, it is pointed out that there is no inconsistency in the talks given by the Upanishads. There is complete consistency. Even when we say that Prakriti is the Jagat Karanam, we say it knowing that that is the way it comes out, but it is not. Purusha is the Jagat Karanam. So this is called Samanvaya Adhyaya, which we will study as Sutra number 4. Hopefully the last one in this series, and then we will decide on the classes. So this is the uniqueness of the Vedantic teaching. So now you can see the uniqueness of the Vedantic teaching, which is that all the Upanishads consistently say that none of the materials that you see in the world, whether it is Paramanu, whether it is atoms, or it is Prakriti, nature, because there are, Darwin's theory also is nature. I mean, we have known this for a long time. He also thinks that there is survival of the fittest. You know, his famous examples. that if you go to a forest and you see these green colored bugs are many. The reason is that the other clearly different colored bugs in the forest gets picked off by birds. But they have difficulty distinguishing between green colored leaves and the green colored bugs. And so they cannot eat them. And so they survive. It's called survival of the fittest. So he says this is a natural selection. It's called Prakriti. Prakriti is the one that you see. And so we say, not really. It appears to be that way, but it isn't. Prakriti is not the Jagat Karana. So this is the uniqueness of the Vedantic thinking, which is being pointed out, starting with this verse itself, and it will be consolidated in the fourth verse, Samanvaya. Tattu Samanvayat. So Samanvaya means absolutely no conflicts, it is so on and so forth. So this is number 3. Number 4, also very important. So, people say, wait a second. If you want to be really consistent, why do you even sometimes say that Prakriti is the Jagat Karana? That's confusing. We understand that the predominant use is Brahma is the Jagat Karana, but once in a while you say Prakriti is there is a reason for that. What is that reason? Why are you confusing? Is it because you are not sure yourself? You want to cover your possibilities? Or is it because you're confused? What is the reason for it? Is it misleading? So the answer to that is no. Both statements are correct. Purusha and Prakriti as the Upadana Karanam, Upadana Karanam means the material cause, are correct. Why? Because Prakriti does not exist independently of Purusha. Maya does not exist independent of Brahman. The ornaments do not exist independent of the gold. The waves of the ocean are not independent of the water. So, even when we say that Prakriti is the Jagat Karanam, we say it from the standpoint that it is the expression of Brahman's manifestation. It is the glory of gold that you have such beautiful, shiny ornaments. The shine of the ornament is the shine of the gold. The weight of the ornament is the weight of the gold. The touch of the ornament is the touch of the gold. And gold, as you know, is unique because it does not tarnish. The non-tarnishing of the ornaments is the quality of the gold. So when we say that Prakriti is the Jagat Karanam, you might as well say that Brahman is the Jagat Karanam. In fact, that's what you're supposed. That's why you even say Prakriti, because you say, what a beautiful ornament. That means what a beautiful golden ornament. So we say that Prakriti is what is called the Parinami Upadana Karanam. Parinami means the one which which seems to have transformed the gold into something which is useful. That's a different thing altogether. The gold can be construed as being either beautiful, or supposing you have uh, a piece of ornament which is not well made, which is not beautiful, that is also gold. So the quality that apparently changes the gold into beautiful or non-beautiful is called parinami upadana karana. You can say that, for example, supposing a person is skilled and is able to build some ornaments that are very, very subtle and thin, as opposed to other ornaments where you don't require a lot of skill. You can just make some, like a bangle. So there's you can say parinama, but Purusha is the vivarta upadana karana. So you should be familiar with these words by now. You know that. Vivarta means that when it appears to change, but it does not change. Gold is vivarta upadana karana, natu parinama upadana karana. But it is the upadana karana. You can quibble about it, whether it is parinami or vivarta or anything like that. Ultimately, though, it is the upadana karana. And you can say, another thing you can say is that Brahman is the parinami upadana adhishthanam. It is the very content of the parinami upadana, vivarta upadana karana. So now we can answer this accusation or doubt you may, that the Sankhya people can also say this. The Sankhya people will say, you also say that Prakriti is the Upadana Karanam, and we also say that Prakriti is the Upadana Karanam. So we are saying the same thing. Why are you making such a big distinction? So we say, no, we are making a big distinction because you, the Sankhya philosophers, only believe that Prakriti is the Upadana Karanam, not the Purusha Upadana Karanam. Whereas we think, our belief is, not only belief, our knowledge is, that even when it appears to be the Prakriti as the Upadana Karanam, it is reflected like a appliance, reflecting the electricity. So the ultimate upadana karanam is Brahman alone. It may appear to be that of a Prakriti. There's a big distinction. You only say that this Prakriti is the upadana karanam, and we say no. Atma, Brahman, is both the nimitta and upadana karanam, as a vivarta upadana karanam. So this is number 4. Number 5, and the last one, is a concept. Eka vijnanena sarvam vijnanam bhavati. Eka vijnanam. So this comes in Mundaka Upanishad, Chandogya Upanishad. So it means by knowing the ultimate cause, you might as well know everything else. Upadana karana vijnanena sarvam karyam karanam bhavati. Products do not exist separate from the cause. That's the vivarta upadana karana. And so this is the last one. And I think that with this we can wrap up the second sutra. We may have some final thoughts next time. We will do so. This reminds me of one actual incident that happened in the case of Swami Dayanandji. So when he was talking in UK at one time, apparently, he doesn't go to UK that often, United Kingdom, England, but I think he did go once or twice early on. And one of the people who was listening to him was so impressed by his talks and his concepts and his elucidation of the Shastric principle. He was a very rich jeweler in London, Indian jeweler. And so Swamiji was reciting this incident. He said, so he had bhiksha at his house. And after the bhiksha, he said, Swamiji, I want you to come to my shop and bless me, because I have a very, very big retail shop, and you can come and you can look at all the ornaments that we have, and I need your blessings, so please come. Swamiji says, okay, we'll come. So when he went to his shop, this jeweler said to Swamiji, Swamiji, I am so indebted for you for showing me the light of the truth that I want to give you a gift. So kindly do this. Please ask for any ornament in this shop and this is yours. Any one thing you have, you just ask for one word and then we will give it to you. Swamiji said, that's wonderful, very good. Swamiji doesn't need any ornaments, what he's going to wear. So he said, okay, good. It's nice to have a student who is so generous. Swamiji said, okay, here's my answer. I want gold. So the jeweler said, what? He was expecting, I want a bangle or I want a necklace, maybe a ring for your finger or something like this. But Swamiji says, I want gold. So they all laughed about it and so on. Gold means, you know what? I want everything in your shop. Anything, because the whole shop was made of nothing but gold. It was a gold jeweler. So this is how it is. So, yena jnanena sarvam jnanam bhavati. So this is what is given in the Upanishads also. That in the Chandogya Upanishad, for example, his son was sent to a Gurukulam by the father. And in those days, 12 years of a Gurukulam was considered to be the ultimate education. I don't know if I ever told you this or not, but I had a mama, my maternal uncle, the oldest one, Raghubirji. He was, because I was born into a Vedic family. Even though I never studied Vedanta, I didn't understand it, but at least my samskaras are good. And so my Nanaji, my grandfather, sent his older brother to a Gurukulam. And I tell you, out of all the people that I remember in my life, the Raghubir uncle's face, his talks, his expressions, his love stand out in me. And one very interesting thing was, he was married off to a person who was not very good. She was a terror. There are separate stories about that. And she was so tough on her own children. She was always fighting with people and so on. Somehow or the other, that made my Raghuveer uncle even more mellow. I never forget that because he was always smiling. He's kind of got used to it, just saying whatever, that's her problem. And he would try to reason with her and so on, but he says, that's the way she is. What am I? You got us married. It was all arranged marriage. This is what happens in arranged marriages. And he was a very wonderful personality. I still remember this so well. I lived with him in Mumbai. He moved from Amritsar to Mumbai to do some cloth trading. And when I was growing up in my college, I had a summer job in Mumbai, and I lived with him for 3 or 4 months. 2 small bedrooms, and there was like 9 of us. It was so phenomenal. All of us would stay on the floor and so on and so forth. This was when I was about 20 years old, maybe 19, 20, second or third year of my college. And anyway, I remember him. So he was sent to a Gurukulam. So you can see his teachings, his personality was shaped by the Gurukulam. Anyway, this is just on the side. I think I better wind up. So in Chandogya Upanishad, this student is sent by his father to a Gurukulam. When he comes back, he's highly schooled and very proud of himself. And in fact, it says that he did not even bow down and touch the feet of his father. He did not do namaskara. The father said, "Oh my God, this guy, he's got a new ego." So he asked him, he said, "Son, let me ask you a question. Did you ask the teacher this question, 'Sir, is there something by knowing which everything in the world is as well known?'" So first the student, his son, did not even understand the question. He says, "Can you please repeat it?" So he repeated. And then he could see that either the teacher didn't know, and this is the reason that the teacher didn't know, because I was one of the best students, and if you knew it, he would have told it to me, but he didn't. So he fell down at the feet of his father because he respected his father. He said, "Sir, is there a thing like that? Can you please teach it to me?" And so the teaching goes. This is the number 5 point. That for us to conquer the various stages of my life, I don't have to be outwardly successful. Not necessary. It's not possible. Not only not necessary, it is not possible. But the understanding of the self, which is the Jagat Karanam, if I do, which is difficult, I'm done. So this is in fact the true import of the second sutra. Okay, I'm a little bit over my time, so let us do a prayer and then I will see if you had any questions. Om Rahu Grasta Divankarendu Sadrisho Maya Samachadana Sanmatra Karanopasamharanato Yo Bhut Sushuptaf Puman Pragaswapsamiti Prabodha Samaye Yafpatya Vigyayate Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshinamurtaye Balyadishu Vapi Jagradadishu Tatha Sarvasvavasthasvapi Vyavrittasvanuvartamanamahamittyantaspurantam Sada Swatmanam Prakatikaroti Bhajatam Yo Mudraya Bhadraya Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshinamurtaye Vishwam pashyati karyakaranataya swaswami sambandhataha Shishyacharya tathaiva putradyatmana bhedataha Swapne jagrati vaya esha purusho maya paribhramitaha Tasmai Shri Gurumurtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshinamurtaye Bhurambhamsya nalo nilo ambar maharnatho himamshuf puman Ityabhati charatcharatmakamidam Yasyaiva murtyashtakam Nanyat kinchana vidyate vimrishatam Yasmat parasmat vibho Tasmai Shri Gurumurtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshinamurtaye Sarvatmatvamiti Sprutikritamidam Yasmadamushminstave Tenasya Shravanat Dattamananat Dhyanat Sankirtanat Sarvatmatvamahavibhuti Sahitam Syadishwaratvam Swataha Siddhetat Punarashtadha Parinatam Chaishwaryam Avyahatam Ashubhani Nirachaste Tanoti Shubhasantatim Smriti Matrena Yatpumsam Brahmatan Mangalam Param Atikalyana Rupatvat Nitya Kalyana Samshrayat Smartranam Varadatvat Brahmatan Mangalam Viduhu Omkaraschatha Shabdascha Dvavetau Brahmanah Pura Kantham Bhitva Viniryatau Tasman Mangilakau Vubhau Omatha 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 Asato Ma Satkamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om. So good to see you all. Wonderful. Varun, you had a question. Varun says, so like solidified iceberg, our jivatvam is solidified and separated from Swarupa, cause of our own solidified wrong notion, which has to be eventually melted. So yeah, something like that, but it is much more than that. I think that probably a much more effective way of looking at this is not get caught up in the melting and so on and so forth, but more on the swapnavastha. So if you look at the dream avastha, the dream experience of our lives, what you find is that I'm very much involved with it. I mean, this is what we studied in the Mandukya Upanishad and the Karika. For those of you that we have studied, you will see that what was pointed out is absolute identity between Jagrat Avastha and Dream Avastha. And so now, having said that, it is not a gradual melting, but in fact, it is waking up from the dream. Because in the dream, I am totally involved with all kinds of things which are totally false and nothing to do with me. And the moment I wake up, and so there Ishvara has really provided us with an instant release. And it can be a number of things. Usually, it's interesting, I don't wake up, I don't need an alarm. But I put an alarm in. I usually wake up at 4 or 5 o'clock this morning, about 3 hours early, just to relax, and not relax, but to prepare for it and get into. I do my own meditation, my own study, and have breakfast and so on and so forth, shave and take a shower. It all takes me about 3 hours. So I wake up at 5 o'clock. And usually I wake up on my own, but today I was not awake until the alarm woke me up. And so sometimes the dream can be woken up by an alarm. Sometimes something happens, different things. But then the leaving of the Swapnavastha is instantaneous. So in the case of Jagrat Avastha, my understanding that the Jagrat Avastha is very much like the Swapnavastha is the waking up from it. So the melting process that you speak of is not as difficult, not as time consuming. It's pretty much instantaneous. But we make it difficult because we refuse to believe, how can this be? This is so real. I've got problems and so on. This is not like that. So the Shastra says no. Please see. This is why we say, I think that I mentioned this in the last week's session that we have, that in order for us to really try to see that the world, I'm trying to solve my issues of the world, it's never going to be done. The best thing is to really understand that I am whole and not spend as much time in trying to solve the problems of my problems of the world. So if you do that, then slowly you find that this is happening, and that accelerates. And so it's a different phenomenon than the one that we're talking about. Don't get caught up with it. It is just to give an example like that. And the example there was that unlike a appliance which is made out differently than electricity, the icebergs and the various salt dolls are also made out of the same thing. That's all. Otherwise, the better example is the dream example. I see a new name which I'm not familiar with, Vinita Beerman. Vinita, if you could just send me some information about yourself, I would be happy to add you to the roster so you get all the information. I don't see any other questions, so with that, I close the class and hopefully we'll see you next week. Om.